Hey guys, how you going? You good? Hell yeah! So first of all, I would love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and waters of which we gather upon today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I do so under responsibility as a bachelor and Garawa saltwater Murray man. So bachelors of Fraser Island, Harvey Bay, and Maryborough, Queensland, and Garawas of the Northern Territory up near the Gulf of Carpentaria, and that's where my skin name comes from, Yakamari. So today I've been asked to come and share a little bit about my story, and I kind of want to take you all the way back because it's quite hard to fit my whole life story within 30 minutes, but I'll try my best. And to talk about how I discovered my roots as it's the topic of the day. So I want to take you all the way back to the 3rd of June in 1994, and as you can see, I was a chubby little fella. I had the guns back then too. But it wasn't much longer though after that. I was placed into out-of-home care, and when I was around 4 years old, and I stayed there until I was 18 years old. And during that time in foster care, it was extremely harsh, and it's difficult to say the least. I had shifted multiple placements in my time in care. I eventuated through 17 different foster homes. I had grown up in many different communities. I was born here in Paddington, but then I eventually moved out to Western Sydney, and then I moved out to the country towns, and I lived in places such as Yass, Bynalong, Goulburn, Tumut, Griffith, and then eventually come back to Sydney and Campbelltown. And to date, as a 25-year-old, I've lived in over 35 different homes. So that stability for me as a kid was never existent, and therefore, as well, I wasn't able to discover my roots. I was taken from my cultural identity. I was then filled with struggle and pain and uncertainty for my whole life, my whole childhood pretty much. And I was told that just inches away from my face, when I come home from school, I'd drop my bags down, and my carers would get inches away from my face and say, "Isaiah, you are a nobody. That's why you're in foster care, because your family abandoned you, and you're going to end up just like your parents, a nobody and thrown in jail." So, just at 7 years old, I was told that. So I thought that was going to be a reality for me. And where I grew up with other Aboriginal kids, and often the time I'd see them getting caught up with the Gungeons, which is the Aboriginal name for the police there. And I thought that where I was living on that street, that I was going to end up just like everyone else I was told I was going to be. And so at home it was difficult, but so was my schooling. I had to repeat year 4. I couldn't even read or write or spell my name, and it was very difficult. And because I was also taken away from all my family, and I wasn't able to have my roots, so I wasn't strong in my identity, and I never felt that sense of belonging, which I believe culture gives you, and I was taken from that. And so I finally met my sister when I was around 7 years old, but prior to that, I never met my older sister or my other younger brother. And it was only until a couple of years ago I was able to actually meet my older sister for the first time, because the system took me away from that and told me that I wasn't allowed to see them when I wanted to. I remember days where I'd come back from school, and I'd put my bag down as well, and I'd get on my hands and knees and I'd pray. Because I used to go to this Christian camp on the holidays, and it was for disadvantaged kids who were in out-of-home care. And I used to meet kids who were just like me, and they would tell me about their stories, and it gave me a sense of hope. I figured that I wasn't the only one in this situation. And so I'd come home from school and I'd pray. I'd pray that one day I'd wake up and that I'd be able to be with my family, and I'd be able to meet my older sister and be with my younger sister. But unfortunately, it never happened for me. So I was doing pretty bad at school. I couldn't. I guess I was caught up with a bad crowd. I was constantly jigging or truanting, I think the name is at school. And I would never go to my classes. I'd always jig, and I'd go to the skate park and just roam around. Really, I had no direction, had no sense of purpose in my life until it was in 2010. I was offered by Family Community Services because I was so troubled at school, and they thought, well, this kid's kind of got no hope unless he gets that stability. And this opportunity come about to go to this school called St. Gregory's College in Campbelltown. And I grew up in many country towns, and when I went to Campbelltown, I thought it was like a big city. It was Sydney to me, when it's actually like the West, not bagging the West or anything, but there's no big skyscrapers or anything out there. But I remember going to the first introduction day at St. Gregory's College, and there was around 1,200 young boys, and they were all dressed like I was there. They had the blazers on, the tie, the collared shirt, and mind you, at that time when I went there, I had 2 rat's tails, and they were plaited, and they were blonde, right? And I had a darker complexion too as a kid, and then I had a hat that I used to wear that I actually found on the roof of the school. I don't know whose hat it was, but I was wearing it around anyways, acting cool. And so I used to wear it not to the front, not to the back, but I used to wear it to the side. And my hair was really, really long, and I had like little bit of patches of beard, just starting, puberty and all. And the college director was like, "Look, Isaiah, you're gonna have to shave off those dangling things from your ear. You're gonna have to wear a collared shirt and tie and the correct dress shoes and all that." And mind you, I used to wear. It was mufti day every day for me at my old school. I used to wear whatever I wanted, except I just didn't have to bring the dollar coin donation. That's what I'm saying. And so it was a big shock. I never even used an iron before. I hadn't even seen that contraption before. So it was a massive difference for me, and it gave me a lot of discipline, routine, and it gave me a sense of direction. So I went to the school mass, and not only were there 1,200 boys, but they're all singing. They're all singing the hymns and stuff like that. And I truly found my sense of belonging there at the school. A lot of people, because it was a boarding school, a lot of the boys would say, "Oh, I'm going back to school," when we'd catch the bus from the country towns back to Sydney. But for me, I was like, "Well, I'm going back home." And it was all going great for me. I played a lot of sports. I was a pretty athletic fella. I received Sportsman of the Year, like my first year that I went to that school, because I played everything. And that was my outlet. That's where I felt a connection and, in a way, discovering my strengths. And everyone wanted me to on their footy team or whatever, because I was quick. And it was all going great for me. I was to stay there till I was in year 12. But my whole first term, I was on detention. All the boys, we eat together, and we eat at a place called the Ref. And all the boys used to come up to me and at the next class, go, where do you go on recess and lunch, mate? Like, do you go and hang out with the day boys? And that's like the ultimate like disrespect, You don't hang around the day boys if you're a boarder. And I was like, no. I'm actually on detention. They're like, yeah, but like not all the time, mate. And I go, like literally all the time. And they're like, oh, right, okay. And so I asked my mates, because you couldn't go to the Ref when the session's on with school. So I used to get my mates to bring me food to the next class, and I'd eat it at the back. And so the first grade rugby league coach, because I was playing first grade when I was 16, I used to play with some of the boys that play NRL now, like James Tedesco and Adam Elliott, a few other boys. And so, and the first grade coach said to me, Isaiah, look, if you want to play rugby league for us, you're going to have to listen up in class. And because I keep on getting reports from your teachers that you're not doing well. I said, all right, sweet. So I didn't necessarily listen up or learn. I just shut up and just stayed in the back corner, trying to distract the other kids. And so it was all going great. I had turned 18, and I was trying to complete my high school certificate. I had got the letter from fax saying that you're no longer a ward of the state. They used to use that term, unhumanizing term. And so it was pretty much saying how much the minister wrote to me and said how much it was appreciation of hers to support me through my childhood years, which is quite ironic, I thought. But then at that same time, my carers, just a couple of months before I turned 18, had said I was no longer able to live with them. So I was 17. I had nowhere to go. Luckily, I lived at school. But then in the holidays, school holidays and things like that, I had nowhere to go. I had no family, had no financial support. So practically, I was homeless whilst I was under child protection. And so I just stayed at friends' houses. I couch surfed wherever I could, and fortunately, because the boys went back to their country towns, I used to go with them and just tell them that my family was overseas. They were always overseas, you know, because I guess for me as a kid who come from nothing, and being surrounded by kids who their parents pay thousands and thousands of dollars for them to attend school, you know, it was kind of normal to say that your parents were overseas enjoying themselves, you know, while you're at boarding school. And so I turned 18. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and at that same time, I created an account on Facebook. And as soon as I did that, I got all these requests from all these people with the last names Dawsons, Leones, Mackeys, Sandys, and they were introducing themselves saying that they were my family. And they were saying, oh, I'm your uncle so-and-so, and like massive, massive paragraphs, and saying things like, you know, we never knew where you children were when you were in care. We've been looking for you guys our whole life. But we were told by the system so many lies on where you actually were, so we never found out. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, whatever. Because we were told horrible things by our carers, that our family never wanted us, that they abandoned us. That's why we're in care. And so we thought, well, you know what? If you loved us, well then you would have found a way. You would have grabbed us out of that situation. And so for the first 2 years, I received all those messages, and I didn't ever reply. I saw them, but I didn't reply. And eventually, I gave it a chance. I gave one of my aunties my phone number, and she called me up. She said, "Hey Isaiah," and just through the phone, I could sense that love that she had for us. Like I could feel it immediately, and just the mannerisms, how she spoke, was quite the same as myself. And so it was only a couple of years ago I went back. I actually, you know, I took a leap of faith, and went back to Brisbane, and that's where most of my family live as well. And I met for the first time my nan, so my mum's mums and uncles and aunties, and so these are my nans and pops. So and unfortunately, my mum's mum, when I was in care, I was told, I think when I was around 16, by my caseworker that my nan had passed away, and I didn't know how to feel about it. You know, I didn't have that connection to my roots enough to feel that emotion. I never have met her in my whole life. And when I went back, I heard all the stories about my nan, and her name was Nana Mookie Dawson, and she was a phenomenal woman. She was a quiet one of all the nanas, but she was the most staunch, and she was the shorter lady. But all my nanas in that say she'd throw down if you have a few words, but disrespectfully. And I heard of her resilience, and I heard the stories of my nanas and pops' resilience, and I realized then that resilience is a muscle, right? It's kind of like a muscle. You know, when you go to the gym, everyone goes to the gym to fail, basically, because they know that at the end of it, they're going to become stronger, right? And so when I grew up in care, I guess I built that resilience. I built that emotional resilience too, and that was passed down in my genes, right? You know how people say, well, trauma is intergenerational. You know, if you have a kid and you've got trauma, well, if you've got trauma and you have a kid, then that kid's going to have trauma as well. Well, I see that the same as resilience, right? There's strong resilience that my old people went through and still push through, that traveled down to me and my younger sister. That's why we were able to break through 18 years of pretty much jail. And so to tell you a little bit about my nans and pops and how they went through the struggles. So my nans and pops, to take you back how I got into out-of-home care. Because you might be like, oh, well, your parents stuffed up, that's why you're in care. But it's actually much further than that. So give you perspective, my great-grandfather was Papa Nimrod. And he was taken from Garawa country for apparently spearing a cow, which he didn't. And he was taken to Palm Island. And then Palm Island is where Aboriginal people were taken, and all sorts of injustices happened there. And he was one of the only men to ever escape Palm Island. And he made his way south. And he was eventually captured on the way and taken to Barrenbar Mission Sherburg. And my nana Winifred Tanner was born on Fraser Island, we call it Gari. It's a traditional name. It's kind of disrespectful to say Fraser Island. I can tell you later why, but on Gari. And she was taken when she was 11 years old. And she was taken to Barrenbar Mission Sherburg, where she met my great-grandfather. And then they had children of their own. So my nans and pops. And then they were taken into girls' and boys' dormitories. And then my nan had us children. And then we were taken... my nan had my mum and my uncles and aunties, and then they were taken into out-of-home care and foster care. And then my mum had us children, me and my siblings, and then we were taken into out-of-home care. So you can see the intergenerational trauma has lasted 4 generations in my family. But with the work that I do at ID Know Yourself, and what we represent is strength, courage, resilience. And I can tell you that this is the generation where this cycle stops. It stops with me, and it stops with every child that I come across who's in out-of-home care. Thank you. And so when I was in Brisbane, for the first time, they got a big barbecue together just for me, to introduce myself to the family, and it was awesome. Like, I met so many, and this is only just a handful. So what I realized is, I come from one of the biggest Aboriginal families in Queensland, yet as a kid, I never met any of them. So that's how corrupt the out-of-home care system is. And unfortunately, I got out of the system around 7 years ago. The system hasn't changed. There's a lot to change. I realized that over time that you can't change the past, but you can change the future. And in order to see it and it to become a reality, you have to actually change it. No one else is going to do it for you. And so with that in mind, I knew that I had to go back to country, and I had to dance and discover my roots a bit more, because I started up a mentoring program, but I still felt that disconnection from my cultural identity. And I realized when speaking to the kids, I didn't know much about myself. So I had to go back. And fortunately, I've got uncles and aunties uncles that are the songmen from Bachelor country. And so I went back, it was a few months ago I went back. And so these are a few of the photos of me discovering my roots. And while I was dancing, I'll show you in a second, there's a big photo of everyone who danced that day. And that was my first time ever being on country and dancing. And these songs that we're dancing to, thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, that Bachelor people have gone before me, and now it's my responsibility to do the same and pass on the knowledge that I learned to this next generation. And so this was one of my cousins who I met for the first time, and it was like, he is such a good young man, and we were just yarning and talking about everything, and it's such a spiritual place there for me in Harvey Bay and Maryborough, Queensland. And I remember I went back to Brisbane, and my uncle said to me, he was a songman, he said, look Isaiah, even though you didn't grow up with culture your whole life, don't worry, we kept that culture alive for when you returned home. And that was very special. And even the paint-ups, we depending on the ceremony, so that's actually my Uncle Fred Leone here. He's one of the songmen. That's Uncle Travis there, he in the middle, at the back, he's a songman. That's me, that's my cousin, and that's another fella, Bachelor fella. But so even the paint-ups, like the 3 Bachelor laws, and this is one of the things I had to learn straight away, and my nans and that would question me, and it's a thing in culturally, I'm always told by my uncles and that, is that they tell us once, and if you don't learn then they're not going to tell you again. So my nana told me once, and I wrote it down, what the 3 Bachelor laws were, and sometimes depending on the ceremony, we have the 3 Bachelor laws, so LORES, laws, not like white fella laws, LAWS. It's like since the beginning of time, but laws that have been in place culturally, and they were to basically our boundaries, what we had to do as people. So we had 3 paint-ups as well, and not on this particular one, dancing, but others. And 3 Bachelor laws are: do not touch or take anything that does not belong to you. whatever is good for the land must come first, and if there is plenty, then you must share. And I was asking my nans, and I was like, so what happened if you don't abide by those laws? They say, well, in our community, if you step over those boundaries, then you get asked where you want the spear, anywhere on your body part, and then it's taken there. Apparently, a lot of the people would take it on the shoulder, and so this is all the young men, and during all this, the dancing that I went there, I figured out that a lot of those young people were my nieces and nephews. They were my family, and this is the first time I was actually meeting them. And then this is all the people together that danced that day. And and this is the thing about culture, right? It's an old saying I like to say is that with culture, you're never too old to learn and you're never too young to teach, right? And so some of these young boys, because I'd never danced on country before and danced to the songs, the kids were teaching me. And these kids were like 8 years old, 9 years old. And that's the power of culture. And so I also went back a couple of months ago. Has anyone been to Fraser Island here? A few people? Yeah. So Gari is the traditional name. And in a particular place on Gari is the Valley of the Giants, right? So there's these humongous trees. I'm standing a bit closer to the camera, so I look a lot bigger than not bigger than the tree. Come on now, but but it's a big tree. It's humongous. It's probably here to the fan away in a way, huge, and they're 10 meters high. And as we're cruising through, because Gari is the largest sand island in the world, and so you got to travel on 4x4s in trucks, and we come through this place, and Uncle Fred, which I showed you before, he felt sick automatically, and he's like, he was driving, he's like, I got to get out for a second, and then he got out, and he grabbed some of the sand and put it underneath his armpits and on his body, in a way of healing and helping him through it. And at the same time, he looked up, and he saw this bulge in the tree, and he goes, oh. And I go, what? He goes, oh. I'm like, what? He's like, oh. I'm like, tell me what's going on, mate. What's going on? He goes, yeah. He's like, hey, don't look directly, but let's have a look up there. And I had a look, and it was this big kind of bulge, black-looking thing up in the tree, and this big. This tree was probably like 15 meters high. And he goes, look, you know what happened? Oh, I asked my nana then, one of the elders. I said, look, what's going on? She goes, well, back in the day, if you were a leader within the community here, a bunch of the people, you were buried as a seed with that tree, right? And as it grew, that person is now stuck at the top there. And we kept going through, and we saw a few others, and that's why my uncle felt sick, And so I was like, well, how old is that? And they're like, oh, hundreds and hundreds of years old. Like that's how old it is. And I was like, far out, that's crazy. And then other crazy things happened when I was on Gari. Very spiritual place for us. Like, I was walking through, and my uncles were walking ahead, and it was like silent, right? It was like pitch black like this. And then as I was walking, this like big gush of wind went, it sounded exactly like that. And it made me look right. And then automatically I got goosebumps. And the reason to that was because I saw just one tree swinging like this, and the rest of the trees were still. And I was like, that's freaky. And it was directly straight in front of me, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I got the shivers, and I ran to my nan, and I was like, hey, this just happened. And then she's like, oh, you know what that is? She's like, oh, did you have your shoes off? And I was like, yeah. She's like, good. She's like, that's the ancestors welcome you home. And I was like, oh, wow. And so, after discovering my roots and coming back to community, I felt stronger in my identity. I felt stronger in my roots, and it gave me a whole lot more purpose in my life. And so the way we also said hello to the ancestors who were up in that trees, right, is we got sand from Gari, and as you can see, there's 2 handprints there, and my uncle was doing it, and I was like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, come here, and put your hand down and you put sand over it and leave your handprint there. And that's the way you say hello. And so this is also a significant place on Gari. It's called Lake Mackenzie. And the fellas who've been to Gari, you would know of it, eh? It's a beautiful, majestic place. And so that place there is a meeting place for our old people. And it's so, like, the sand is so fine. You know when you have like flour or something? So it's kind of like flour. You put your hand in it and it just automatically just seeps through your hand kind of thing. You go like that and everything's off. That's what the sand is like there. And so before this, you know, the Mecca and all that stuff for all the I guess hand and body lotion and whatnot, the way we exfoliated back in the day was this sand. So it's so fine, and we put it on our skin and then wash it off in the water. And so I learned many things along my journey there, especially like because fortunately when I was traveling around, I traveled with my nana, who's the bachelor linguist, so she knows all the language. I traveled with Uncle Fred, who's the songman, and I also traveled with who knows all the songs and dances and things like that from all around Australia, but particularly our country. And then also Uncle Travis, and he knows all the plants on Gari. And then obviously my nan knows all the lingo, the language and stuff. And obviously on Gari there's animals, there's dingoes, and they're called wongaries. And so we see wongaries everywhere. And there was old paintings and stuff like that were done that had Aboriginal people sitting around, bachelor Aboriginal people sitting around the campfire, and the wongaries were with us. But you hear all these negative stories of how, you know, dingoes and all that hurting people and being nasty and whatnot. But, you know, they used to be our pets. They were part of our clan, you know. Until people started to manipulate and tease and mock and whatnot, abuse the dingoes, that they've got the mentality now that we are food, I guess. Friends, not food now. And so, so when I went back there, it was phenomenal for me. It was life changing, and I had people who used to say, "You got to go back, country, got to go back." But it was a big, you have to take a lot of courage to go back, because you realize at the same time that you've missed a whole lot of your childhood, and a lot of the kids and stuff know all the creation stories. They know all sorts of stuff. So a lot of catch up to do. So 3 years ago, I had an idea, and it was to start up a mentoring organisation to support Aboriginal children in out-of-home care. And because when I was growing up, there were no mentoring programs for kids like me, unfortunately. And as I read more and more, I found out that there is a lot of Aboriginal children in out-of-home care in Australia. There's actually around 22,000 Aboriginal children in out-of-home care in Australia. And of that, a percentage, more than half of those are more likely to end up in the criminal justice system. As an Aboriginal child in care, you are 3.5 times more likely to become unemployed, and you are 14 times more likely to become homeless. So the stats are absolutely atrocious and disgusting, and it's a national shame. And I figured no one was doing anything about it. So I wanted to be the change that these kids needed to see in their lives, and fight for them and be there for them and support them along their healing and empowerment journey. And so I started up a couple of years ago. Well, we officially started last year, but I had the idea a couple of years ago. And I created 6 components. So there's cultural identity, there's yarn time, like what we're doing here is storytelling. And that helps these kids along their healing and empowerment journey. There's life after care, so cooking, cleaning, budgeting, hygiene, resume letter building, getting these kids job ready. Then there's education, health, and giving back. Really important to give back. And actually, just in 1 month, and potentially, if you guys want to get involved, come and help out in our new giving back kitchen. So we started up with 2 of our chefs who help our kids cook at the settlement. We're going to start up a little soup kitchen, run every Thursday, once a month. So come on, give us a hand, follow us on Instagram or Facebook, and keep posted with it. And so to give you, I guess, a good way to give you perspective on how much impact our program's made. We had a lot of our referrals have been through Koori Court. So these are young Aboriginal fellas who are caught up in the juvenile justice system with out-of-home care background. And these kids have gone through a lot. We had 5 referrals from Koori Court, so juvenile justice. And since those kids come to us last May, none of those kids are reoffended. They haven't reoffended, saving the government more than $240,000 just with those 5 kids of not being in the criminal justice system. And we had 12 mentees last year, but this year we've got 23 mentees. We had referrals. We've had around 55 referrals so far just within this community here. And a lot of our kids that we work with, they come from the towers here, or Redfern, all around. So they come from that low socioeconomic backgrounds, but these kids are, I'll tell you what, they're so strong and resilient, and they got a whole lot of strength. And that's what we focus on. We don't focus on the negatives, the things that they've always been told. You're dumb, you're stupid, you're not going to be anything. We go, hang on, you are smart, you're resourceful. You have gone through so much. That takes a lot of courage. You are the hope for the next generation. And so I want to play a little audio. Obviously, for child protection reasons, we can't show the kid's face or disclose their names. But we've got 2. I wanted to give perspective of a male and female's journey within ID Know Yourself in just the short 6 months that we've worked with them. So I'll try and play it. Just click.
I'm 17 years old. I'm a proud Dawe person. I'm just here today to explain how ID Know Yourself are helping me and how I've achieved things through going through this program and how other young people themselves can join up. So I just would like to talk about where I started. So I grew up in care since I was 6, and I've had a bit of a hard run in with the law, docs, and facts themselves, other people, and it's just ID has pushed me in the right path and helping me find work and accommodation. I think it would help other young people to be in my path that want to do sort of the same thing and have sort of the same mindset. So just started a job at Bunnings with the help of ID Know Yourself, and I want to say that I came from just about nothing. So to have something like this, it really shows that I'm a man to something. So to see other young people come this path and do the sort of stuff I want to do, it means a lot. And if I can help other people do that, then just changing one person's life means something. So thank you.
I'm 17 years old and I'm a proud bureaucrat woman. I was in care for 7 years. Before joining ID, I was in a bad place. I not long came out of care. I was in trouble by the police a lot. I was taking drugs and alcohol. I wasn't going to school. Since starting ID, I've stopped taking drugs and alcohol. I've stopped committing offences. I've been going to school every day and my attendance is now 100%. And I've now got positive role models in my life, and they've also helped me get a part-time job at a coffee shop. I also done work experience at Gilbert and Tobin. I want to be a voice for kids in care. And what I love about ID is that it's family and a sense of belonging and trust.
Thank you. That means a lot. And it was crazy. A couple of years ago, I was 22 when I had the idea. Young, ambitious, hadn't finished university. I had, nearly dropped out of high school. I only got my high school certificate. I didn't get an ATAR, and I didn't have any role models who kind of guided me to do what I wanted with my life. But I knew that no one was ever going to do it for me. I had to do it myself, and I realized that at that time, because people were like, oh, you got to get a business degree and then start it up. I was like, hang on, I don't need a business degree to make impact. I'm like, what do I need to study? I've studied everything. I've lived 18 years of this, I'm a doctorate in this stuff, you know what I mean? I didn't go back. So, 18 years. You ain't study 18 years to become a doctor, mate, So, I was like, you know what? It's not what you know in life, it's what you do that actually matters. You can know a wealth of information, but if you do nothing with that information, then it's pretty much pointless. And so I took what I did know and I've been learning a whole lot along this process. But in everything that we do at ID Know Yourself, we make sure we apply 3 things. These are the key recipes into making impact. A lot of the kids that we've had, they weren't attending school. They didn't have a home. They were homeless. They were self-placing. They they didn't have that stability. They didn't know about their cultural identity. They were in a way hopeless, but now they've got that hope instilled in their life. They know their roots. That's what gives them strength. And we apply 3 things, and that's love, empathy, and consistency in these kids' life to achieve impact in everything that we do. And like I said, there's around 22,000 Aboriginal children in out-of-home care in Australia, and we'll work with 23 this year, but the aim is to eventually, create impact with those kids. I also want to give you our website. So it's www.idknowyourself.com. And also, as you guys being in the creative space, we actually did this humongous canvas, like pretty much the size of this wall. And if you go onto our Instagram, it's just ID Know Yourself is one word. ID Know Yourself on Instagram and Facebook, and you'll see our massive canvas. And eventually just DM us, and you can even come to our activity space at Carriage Works and check it out yourself and get some photos and stuff like that. Because we just created with that canvas that the kids did, because that's what it was around, establishing belonging for these kids. And all the kids have a channel each, because there was 12 mentees last year, all leading towards the meeting place, ID Know Yourself, which gives them that sense of belonging, direction. And in their channel was what gives them their roots, their identity. So a lot of them put their Aboriginal totems, their family names, culturally significant places as for them. I want to do one little thing, and as I said before, my uncle said to me, if you take care of culture, culture will take care of you. I didn't know what he meant back then, but I do now. When you've gone through so much trauma as a kid, it's a lifelong journey. It's not just the overnight thing. There's triggers and things that come up, especially if you're working in that space where you were once, as a kid. So the way I help calm the spirit, the mind, and the body is I play the didgeridoo, and I learnt just around a year ago, and my uncle gave me this didge. And so quickly to wrap it up, but the didgeridoo, some people call it the yidaki, and we call it on Garawa country the rulu. And it originated, the didgeridoo, in Arnhem Land, Northern Territory, and it made its way all the way up to Garawa country, where my people are from, where my great-grandfather's from, and it stopped there, right? And the rest of Australia, why they got the didgeridoo is just through passing and sharing, and but for me, it's appropriate to play the didgeridoo, so I'll play a little spin for ya. Losing my breath up here. It's bloody hot in here. So, last couple of months, and I taught myself how to circular breathe. It's quite hard. You got to puff your cheek, and then as you put in a bit of pressure here, it seeps out a little bit of air, and then at the same time you got to breathe in, so like that kind of thing. I'll teach you one time. And so, just to finish on a quote. I had gone through a lot as a kid, and this is what I say to the mentees every time they might be saying something about their day. I go, you know what, kids? Don't say you're ever having a bad day. Say you're having a character-building day. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. So we're funded by Family and Community Services. Who the system that failed me. It was called DOCS back in the day, Department of Community Services. Quite ironic, I know, right? I said, hey, I could do a pretty good job, better than probably you guys. You know what I'm saying? Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone that I'm probably. I have no funding. No, joke. I'll tell them straight. Don't worry. So, And so we're funded by Family and Community Services, and we were funded last year by another organisation called Their Futures Matters, supporting Aboriginal kids in care. It was specifically designed for that, for kids in care. But the other way we rely upon funding is donations. So just on our website, idknowyourself.com, that really goes so far. And like, because I guess everyone's trying to, because we're a young population, like, to give you perspective, young people from the ages of 18 onwards in Australia, non-Indigenous people make up around 15%, right, of the population. But for Aboriginal children, it's around 35%, under the ages of 18. So we're a young population as Aboriginal people. And statistically, the statistic I shared before around kids in out-of-home care, well, it's actually growing. It's growing and growing and growing. So we're a young generation. If half of our kids are going into out-of-home care, and I'm telling you, there's not many good stories in care, but through ID Know Yourself there is, absolutely. When they come through our doors, they come out as a good story. But for other kids that we come across, so many have been left behind and forgotten. So we rely upon the community too. We even trying to be creative as well. Like, I try and do things that people have never done before, and like the soup kitchen. I don't know any other programs that do that, like as in mentoring capacity stuff. So we want to start up a soup kitchen, give back to the community that helps us. And so we had like little donation boxes at cafes, trying to get, because that money we use from the cafes, that you may have, some of you seen it before, but we use that in the holidays to do activities with the kids. We've gone like jet boating, we went go-karting. The kids love go-karting. Like every term, like every holidays, we're like, oh, what do you want to do? They're like, let's go go-karting. I'm like, yeah, there's something new. They're like, no, go-karting. I'm like, oh my God, again? Yeah. So we do that. But yeah, we're still trying to create a better sustainable organisation around funding, because we can't rely upon the government to always fund us. So we're just trying to think of creative ways, and maybe you guys can help us with that, because we can't do this by ourselves. There's so many kids in out-of-home care in Australia, but I know that with you guys, with us, of course we can get there. One more question? That's it? All right, thank you guys.